Welcome to the Unit 8.1 Synopsis video. This video gives a big picture look at Unit 8.1, introducing the unit challenge scenario, the flow of lessons, and the background content required. Unit 8.1 is designed for 8th grade and is the first unit for the school year. It's comprised of 5 lessons, including the unit opener and unit closer, requiring a minimum of 13 50-minute class periods. The semester unifying cross-cutting concepts are scale, proportion, and quantity. The full title of Unit 8.1 is Night Night, Sleep Tight, Don't Let the Bed Bugs Bite, Adaptation and Natural Selection. In this unit, students encounter the 21st century challenge of resistance, where pest populations change through natural selection to resist control measures. Students are split into unit challenge teams that will compile information about bed bugs and their potential ability to develop resistance to the new insecticide. Within each team, students use a series of models to understand how mutations cause new traits to arise in a population, and how traits that make individuals more likely to survive and reproduce tend to become more common, thus changing the population over time. Students use the information they gather to create a prediction backed by evidence about whether or not bed bugs are likely to develop resistance to the new insecticide. After each group presents, the class comes to consensus about what the exterminator should do. Students work to help Terry, a local exterminator, decide whether or not he should switch from using heat treatment for killing bed bugs to using a new insecticide called Whiz-Bang. Terry is concerned that bed bugs will develop resistance to Whiz-Bang like they did for an older version of insecticide called Invade. The unit challenge question is, what causes a bed bug population to stop being affected by a pesticide? Throughout the unit, students figure out how bed bugs developed resistance to Invade insecticide and use this information to determine that bed bugs will likely develop a resistance to Whiz-Bang at some point in the future. In the process, students observe how random changes in the genetic code of a population changes the structure and function of proteins, and that if these changes in protein function benefit the population, they are likely to be passed from parents to offspring and become a more common trait in the population. Unit 8.1 is built around the concept of adaptation through natural selection. Populations adapt when changes to the environment cause individuals with a particular trait to be more likely to survive and reproduce. Over time, this difference in reproduction leads to that trait becoming more common within the population. These differences in traits between individuals was ultimately caused by mutations. Mutations are random changes to a gene and can be beneficial, harmful, or be neutral to an individual. Those mutations that are beneficial tend to become more common in a population, while those that harm tend to become less common. The environment dictates if a mutation is beneficial, harmful, or neutral. To address the unit challenge, students first investigate how insecticides work and how physiologically bedbugs have become resistant to past insecticides. At this point, students step back and look for reasons why individuals can have different traits. After understanding how traits can arise in individuals, students explore how and why populations change over time. Finally, students consider whether there are limits to the ability of a population to adapt to environmental changes. At the end of the unit, students use their newfound understanding to explain to Terry that although they do not know the exact cellular mechanism of bed bug resistance, based on their understanding of mutations and adaptation, bed bug populations are likely to develop a resistance to Whiz-Bang insecticide sometime in the future. As with other MyStar units, Lesson 1 engages students in the topic, adaptation, and how populations can change over time. Students are introduced to this by first reading a news report about a 2018 bed bug outbreak at a high school, and then watching a series of videos that provide some background information on bed bugs and infestations, and some history about their development of resistance to some insecticides. After uncovering their thoughts and ideas about bed bugs and what it takes to kill bed bugs, students are introduced to the unit challenge scenario. Students have the opportunity to record their initial thinking and consider what they need to learn in order to answer the unit challenge question, and record their thoughts on the unit bubble map. The unit bubble map will be revisited and updated during the unit, reflecting the greater understanding students achieve as they progress through each lesson. During Lesson 2, students investigate how random mutations can cause individuals in a population to possess different traits. Students use a model to simulate and discover how mutations arise randomly in a population, and that these mutations affect the genetic code and ultimately the structure and function of proteins in individual organisms. The key takeaways from this lesson is that new traits can arise in a population through genetic mutations, and that genes determine the shape or structure of proteins, and the structure of these proteins affects their function, and thus the organism. In Lesson 3, students use a model to show how, and some of the reasons why, populations can change over time in response to environmental changes. Students should come away with an understanding that traits that benefit a population become more common, while those that do not tend to become less common. During Lesson 4, students use data from an experiment to discover that there are limits to a population's ability to adapt to environmental change. If environmental changes occur too quickly, it is likely that populations cannot adapt. Similarly, if the changes that occur are outside of the range that a population can manage, they are not likely to adapt. Upon completing Lesson 4, students will understand that populations can adapt to environmental changes over time through natural selection, but that there are limitations to the ability to adapt. For Lesson 5, student groups compile the evidence they have gathered throughout the previous lessons into a presentation that highlights their recommendations to Terry, the exterminator, regarding whether or not bedbugs are likely to develop resistance to whiz-bang insecticide, and if he should consider switching to using whiz-bang insecticide. During the presentations, each group is evaluated by their peers to ensure that they include all the necessary evidence to back up their claims regarding bedbug resistance to whiz-bang. After this phase, the class comes together and comes to consensus on their recommendation, as well as the claims, evidence, and reasoning used to make the recommendation. We've now looked at all the lessons in Unit 8.1. Let's recap a few key points before ending this video. Unit 8.1 is built around the following ideas. Populations are able to adapt to changes to their environment through natural selection. However, there are limits to the adaptation. New traits can emerge in populations through genetic mutation. These mutations are random changes to the genetic code, genes, that change the structure and function of proteins. And finally, traits that benefit a population tend to become more common over time, while those that are not beneficial tend to become less common. You can find out more about Unit 8.1 by taking the Unit 8.1 Primer course and looking at the resources on the MyStar website at the address at the top of this page. Thank you for watching the MyStar Unit 8.1 Synopsis video.